Ambassador Jinho Kim stood at the podium in the great chamber of the Galactic Council. The massive room stretched out before him like a sea of alien faces. Some had multiple eyes, others had no eyes at all. Some breathed air, others floated in, water tanks. But they all had one thing in common. They were not listening to him. Honored delegates, Jinho began, his voice echoing through the chamber. I present to you humanity's proposal for equal representation in the Council Defense Committee. A low rumble of conversation filled the room. The Velkari delegate, a creature that looked like a cross between a spider and a tree, clicked his mandibles in what Jinho knew was laughter. The sound always made his skin crawl. The proposal outlines how human tactical knowledge could improve our joint defense systems. Jinho continued, raising his voice slightly. Our recent simulations show a 37% increase in effectiveness when human strategies are implemented. Chancellor Vex of the Velkari hegemony leaned forward in his throne-like chair. His voice boomed across the chamber through the translation system. Ambassador Kim, we appreciate humanity's enthusiasm, but perhaps your species should focus on what they do best. Building things. Fixing things. Leave the thinking to those of us who have been doing it longer. More laughter rippled through the chamber. Jinho felt his jaw clench, but kept his expression neutral. This was the 100th proposal he had presented in 5 years. The 100th time he had been dismissed like a child offering finger paintings to adults. If I may respectfully remind the Council, Jinho said, human forces were instrumental in the victory at Kepler Station. Without our tactical innovations— Yes, interrupted the Zenthari science minister, her crystalline form shimmering with what Jinho had learned was annoyance. We are all grateful for human labor in that conflict. Your people follow orders. Very well. The dismissal in her tone was clear. Jinho had been there at Kepler Station. He had watched human commanders devise the strategies that saved millions of lives. He had seen human soldiers die implementing plans that other species claimed as their own afterward. But pointing this out would only make him look desperate. Thank you for your time, Jinho said, gathering his papers. I will file this proposal with the others for future consideration. Of course, Chancellor Vex said, his attention already turning to other matters. Perhaps next time your people could focus on more practical contributions. We always need more construction crews. Jinho walked out of the chamber with as much dignity as he could manage. In the observation deck above, Dr. Mira Shin watched him go. She had been attending council sessions for 3 years now, and she had never seen a human proposal receive serious consideration, not once. Mira turned her attention to the next speaker, Dr. Koth of the Zenthari Collective. He was presenting research on the plague that had been devastating the Torgak homeworld. She listened with growing anger as he described breakthrough treatments and prevention methods. Every single detail was from her research. Every cure, every preventive measure, every biological analysis, all of it was her work. The Zenthari medical teams have achieved remarkable progress, Dr. Koth was saying. Our innovative approach to viral mutation patterns has allowed us to develop targeted treatments. Mira gripped the railing of the observation deck. The metal bent slightly under her fingers. Those viral mutation patterns had taken her team 2 years to map. They had worked around the clock, analyzing samples that other species found too dangerous to handle. Human immune systems were apparently better at resisting the plague than most other species, so naturally humans did the dangerous work while others took credit for the results. This was the 4th time in 2 years that her research had been presented by someone else. The 4th time her team's breakthroughs had been credited to alien scientists who could barely pronounce the scientific terms they were using. She thought about the message she had received that morning. Her son Jiho was graduating from the academy next week. He wanted to follow in her footsteps to become a xenobiologist and help bridge the gap between species. She wondered what she would tell him about the gap, whether it was worth trying to bridge something when only one side was building. 3,000 light-years away, on the industrial moon of Kepler 442c, Foreman Doyen Park was having similar thoughts. He stood on a scaffold overlooking the construction of the newest orbital defense platform, watching his human crews work with their usual efficiency. They moved like dancers, each worker knowing exactly where the others would be. It was the kind of coordination that took years to develop, and humans seemed to learn it faster than any other species. "Park!" shouted a voice from below. Toyun looked down to see Supervisor Gracht, a hegemony official whose job seemed to consist entirely of watching humans work and complaining about their methods. "Your crews are behind schedule again," Gracht called up. "The platform must be operational in 6 days." Doyen checked his time pad. They were actually 2 days ahead of schedule, but pointing that out would only start another argument. "We'll make the deadline," he called back. "You had better. The hegemony has 3 more platforms to build after this one. If humans cannot handle the workload, we can find other species." The threat was empty, and they both knew it. Other species could do construction work, but not like humans. Humans had an intuitive understanding of spatial relationships and structural engineering that seemed to come naturally. They could work in environments that would kill most other species. They could solve problems that left alien engineers baffled. But most importantly, they worked for half the pay that other species demanded. And they never complained, never struck, never demanded better working conditions. They just quietly built whatever they were told to build, no matter how dangerous or difficult. Doyen watched his crews installing the quantum resonance coils that would power the defense platform. It was delicate work that required perfect timing and coordination. 1. Mistake could cause an explosion that would vaporize half the moon. The hegemony had originally planned to use their own engineers for this part, but after 2 failed attempts and 1 near disaster, they had quietly asked the humans to take over. The irony was not lost on Doyen. They were building weapons that would likely be pointed at human worlds someday. Orbital platforms designed to protect hegemony territory from threats. But when those threats came, it would be human crews who maintained the weapons. Human engineers who kept them running. Human soldiers who would probably die defending worlds that barely tolerated their existence. His time pad chimed with an incoming message. It was from his daughter Sona, who worked as a junior engineer on a research station near the galactic core. The message was brief, but troubling. "Dad, they did it again. Gave my engine design to a Zenthari team. Said it was for the good of the project. I'm starting to think maybe you had the right idea staying in construction. At least when you build something, people can see who did the work." Doyun closed the message and looked out at the defense platform taking shape under his crews. Expert hands. Soon it would be complete, and some hegemony admiral would take credit for its innovative design. The human improvements to the shielding system would be attributed to alien genius. The revolutionary power management systems his people had developed would become another example of non-human superiority. He thought about his grandfather, who had lived through the early days of human space travel. Back then, humans had believed that joining the galactic community would be humanity's greatest achievement. They had imagined sharing knowledge with ancient civilizations, learning from species that had traveled between stars for millennia. Instead, they had become the galaxy's handymen. Useful, reliable, and utterly forgettable. Back on Earth, the Global Unity Council was meeting in emergency session. Representatives from every human world sat around a massive table, their faces grim. The holographic displays showed the same. Story from 100 different worlds. Human contributions ignored. Human innovations stolen. Human sacrifices forgotten. "We cannot continue like this," said Counselor Minho Bai from the outer colonies. "Our people are losing hope. They're starting to ask why we bother." "Because we believe in cooperation," replied Counselor Gina Lim from Earth. "Because we believe that eventually our contributions will be recognized." "When?" asked Counselor Taewon Jung from the industrial worlds. "When will that eventually come? After how many of our people die building their weapons? After how many of our discoveries are credited to others?" The room fell silent. They all knew the numbers. Humans made up less than 3% of the galaxy's population, but they did nearly 15% of the dangerous work. They had the highest casualty rates in construction, mining, and military service. They had developed breakthrough technologies in dozens of fields and received credit for exactly none of them. "We have always believed that patience and dedication would eventually earn us respect," said Council President Hanako. "Perhaps it is time to reconsider that belief." The vote was closer than anyone expected. For decades, humanity had chosen the path of cooperation and service. They had believed that proving their worth through contribution would eventually earn them a place at the table as equals rather than servants. But patience, it seemed, had its limits. The alert sirens screamed across every human settlement in the galaxy. Admiral Bona Lee stood on the bridge of her flagship, the Harmony, watching the emergency broadcasts flood in from across the star systems. The images were horrific. Entire Orvani cities burning under Zephyrian bombardment. Civilian transports exploding as they tried to flee. Children running through smoke-filled streets. "How many?" she asked her communications officer. 67 colonies under attack, came the reply. Population estimates suggest 15 million civilians are trapped in the combat zones. The Zephyrian Empire had struck without warning. Their massive fleets had appeared simultaneously across 12 star systems, targeting the peaceful Orvani colonies with overwhelming force. The Orvani had no military to speak of. They were farmers, artists, teachers. They had never hurt anyone. Within hours, the Galactic Council convened an emergency session. Chancellor Vex's image appeared on screens across the galaxy, his spider-like form trembling with what looked like righteous anger. "The unprovoked attack on our Orvani friends cannot stand," he declared. "All member species are called upon to contribute forces for the defense of innocent lives." Admiral Lee received Earth's response 30 minutes later. The message was simple and direct. "Deploy immediately. Save everyone you can." She looked around the bridge at her officers. Commander Young Kim, her tactical officer, was already pulling up star charts. Engineer Yuna Park was calculating jump distances. Communications officer Jaewon Ryu was coordinating with the rest of the human fleet. They all wore the same expression, she felt, determination mixed with sorrow. They had done this before. "How long to reach the Orvani colonies?" she asked. 18 hours if we push the engines hard," Commander Kim replied. "The other council fleets won't arrive for at least 36 hours. Then we go alone," Admiral Lee decided. "Signal the fleet. Maximum speed." The Human Harmony fleet consisted of 27 ships. They were not the largest vessels in the galaxy, nor the most heavily armed, but they had been built with human engineering principles. They were fast, efficient, and tough. More importantly, they were crewed by people who understood that every minute of delay meant more civilian deaths. As the fleet jumped to hyperspace, Admiral Lee reviewed the tactical situation. The Zephyrian forces outnumbered them 5-1. Their ships were bigger and carried more firepower. By any reasonable analysis, the humans were sailing into a massacre. But Admiral Lee had learned long ago that reasonable analysis only worked when your enemy was reasonable. The Zephyrians were brutal, but predictable. They relied on overwhelming force and fear tactics. They had never faced an opponent who fought back with actual intelligence. The fleet dropped out of hyperspace in the Kelvari system, where the largest Orvani colony was under siege. The tactical display immediately lit up with enemy contacts. 43 Zephyrian vessels surrounded the planet, bombarding population centers from orbit. "Enemy fleet is demanding our surrender," Communications Officer Ryu reported. "They're offering to let us withdraw if we don't interfere." "Tell them we decline," Admiral Lee said calmly. "All ships implement Pattern 7. Pattern 7 was a tactical formation that no other species had ever seen. It had been developed by human strategists who understood something their alien colleagues did not. In space combat, victory did not always go to the side with bigger guns. Sometimes it went to the side that could think faster. The human ships scattered in what looked like a panicked retreat. The Zephyrians took the bait, breaking formation to pursue what they thought were fleeing enemies. But the retreat was carefully calculated. Each human ship led its pursuers into exactly the right position. "Execute," Admiral Lee commanded. The Roig, scattered human fleet suddenly converged from 12 different directions. The Zephyrians found themselves caught in crossfires. their larger ships too slow to react to the rapidly changing situation. Within minutes, half their fleet was disabled or destroyed, but the victory came at a cost. Captain Wanho Nam's ship, the Perseverance, had drawn the heaviest fire to protect a civilian evacuation zone. His vessel was burning, life support failing, but he held position until the last transport cleared the planet's atmosphere. "Perseverance is requesting assistance," Commander Kim reported, his voice tight with emotion. Admiral Lee watched the tactical display as enemy reinforcements closed. On Captain Nam's position, the Perseverance was doomed, but it could still serve one final purpose. "Tell Captain Nam to ram the Zephyrian command ship," she ordered quietly. "Make it count." The explosion lit up space like a new star. 400 human lives ended in that flash, along with 3,000 Zephyrian soldiers. The enemy command structure collapsed, their remaining ships fleeing in disorder. The evacuation continued for 6 more hours. Human ships ferried civilian transports to safety while fighting off sporadic Zephyrian attacks. They saved every Orvani who could be saved. 60 million lives preserved through human sacrifice and human tactics. When the other Council fleets finally arrived, they found the Zephyrians in full retreat and the Orvani colony secure. The crisis was over, won by human blood and human brilliance. The victory celebration was held on the neutral station of Century Prime. Representatives from every Council species attended, their speeches full of praise for the successful defense of innocent life. Admiral Lee stood in the back of the Great Hall, watching the ceremony with growing disbelief. Velkari Admiral Thokmar stood at the podium, his massive form gleaming under the lights. "The strategic brilliance of this victory belongs to the hegemony, tactical command," he declared. "Our innovative battle formations caught the enemy completely off guard." The applause was thunderous. Admiral Lee felt her hands clench into fists. Those battle formations were Pattern 7, developed by human tactical officers over 3 years of careful study. She had just watched Thokmar take credit for strategies that had cost Captain Nam and his entire crew their lives. The speeches continued. The Zenthari science minister announced that their new defensive algorithms had been crucial to the victory. Dr. Mira Shin, watching from the observation deck, recognized her own work in quantum shield harmonics. The algorithms that had kept human ships operational under heavy fire were now being credited to alien genius. Not once during the entire ceremony was humanity mentioned by name. The 400 human dead were listed in the official reports as auxiliary personnel casualties. Captain Nam, who had died saving an entire world, was recorded as transport pilot, name unknown. After the ceremony, Ambassador Jinho Kim requested an audience with the Council leadership. He was granted 3 minutes at the end of the session, after most delegates had left for dinner. "Honored leaders," Kim began, standing before a half-empty chamber. "I wish to speak about the sacrifice of—" Yes, Chancellor Vex interrupted, barely looking up from his meal. "Everyone appreciates human effort in this crisis. Your people did adequate work as support personnel." "Support personnel?" Kim's voice cracked slightly. "Human forces saved 60 million lives. Human tactical innovations won the battle. Human blood paid the price for this victory." "Ambassador Kim," the Zenthari minister said with obvious impatience, "your species has always been emotional about these matters. War is complex. Many factors contribute to victory. Perhaps humans played a small role, but let us not exaggerate." Kim looked around the chamber at the few remaining delegates. He saw boredom, dismissal, condescension. He saw everything except respect. "Thank you for your time," he said quietly, gathering his papers. As he walked out, Kim's communication device chimed, a message from the Orvani refugee camps. It was brief but devastating in its simple honesty. "Thank you for our lives. We saw what you did. We will remember when others forget. The children ask for the names of the heroes who saved them. We tell them about the humans who came when no one else would. We will always tell them." Kim stopped walking and read the message again. Somewhere in the galaxy, an entire species would remember human sacrifice even when humanity's own allies chose to forget it. Children would grow up knowing that humans had died to save them. But here, in the halls of power, that sacrifice was already being erased from history. That night, secure communications flashed between human worlds. Admiral Lee spoke with Foreman Doyen Park on the industrial stations, both connected with Dr. Mira Shin on the research outposts. The conversation was brief and coded, but the message was clear. How long could they continue to give everything and receive nothing? How long could they watch their people die for causes that would never acknowledge their sacrifice? How long could they pretend that cooperation was working when only one side was cooperating? On Earth, the Global Unity Council convened an emergency session once again. This time, the debate was shorter. The questions were simpler. The answers were unanimous. For the first time in human diplomatic history, every human representative voted the same way on the same resolution. The decision would change everything, though the galaxy would not understand that for months to come. The age of human patience was ending. What would replace it remained to be seen. Dr. Mira Shin walked through her laboratory one last time. The research station orbiting Proxima Centauri had been her home for 8 years. Every piece of equipment, every data terminal, every carefully organized sample represented thousands of hours of work. Tomorrow it would all belong to someone else. She stopped at her main workstation and activated the final data transfer. Terabytes of research flowed into encrypted storage drives. Cures for 17 different diseases. Breakthrough treatments for genetic disorders that plagued 6 alien species. Revolutionary techniques for biological warfare defense. All of it was going home to Earth. Dr. Shin? Her assistant, a young Xanthari named Crixtal, appeared in the doorway. The replacement team has arrived. They are asking about the quantum virus samples. Mira looked at the sealed containment units that held her most dangerous work. Inside those containers were viral strains that could wipe out entire planets if mishandled. For 3 years, she had been the only scientist in the galaxy brave enough to work with them directly. Tell the replacement team that the samples have been neutralized, she said calmly. For safety reasons. It was not exactly a lie. The samples were safe. They were also on a transport ship heading to Earth, along with every other piece of critical research her team had developed. Let the Xanthari try to recreate 8 years of breakthrough science from incomplete notes and second-hand observations. Across the galaxy, similar scenes were playing out on hundreds of research stations, construction sites, and military bases. Human scientists quietly packed their work and submitted their resignations. Human engineers completed their final projects and declined to renew contracts. Human military advisors filed their last reports and requested transfers home. Foreman Doyen Park stood on the observation deck of Construction Platform 7, watching the incomplete defense grid that stretched across 3 star systems. His crews had spent 2 years building the most advanced fortification network in galactic history. Quantum-linked shield generators, self-repairing hull plating, weapon systems that could target enemies in hyperspace. It was the kind of project that would have been impossible without human expertise, and now it would remain forever unfinished. Sir? His deputy foreman, Kyujin Han, approached with a datapad. The hegemony supervisors are asking about the power coupling specifications for Section 12. Doyun looked at the half-built structure floating in space. Section 12 was the command center for the entire defense grid. Without it, the rest of the system was just expensive decoration. Tell them the specifications are classified above. Their security clearance, he said. Earth Command will need to approve any information transfer. Kyujin nodded, understanding perfectly. Earth Command would never approve anything. The hegemony would spend months trying to reverse engineer systems they had never bothered to understand. By the time they figured out what they needed, Doyun and his entire crew would be halfway home. The withdrawal was happening everywhere, but it was so quiet that most aliens barely noticed. Humans had always been the background workers, the ones who made things function without drawing attention to themselves. Now they were simply fading away, leaving behind projects that would never be completed and systems that would slowly break down without maintenance. Ambassador Jinho Kim stood before the Galactic Council for what he knew would be the last time. The Great Chamber was fuller than usual, Word had gotten out that humanity was making some kind of announcement, and curiosity had drawn delegates who normally skipped the sessions entirely. Honored delegates, Kim began, his voice carrying clearly through the vast space. I come before you today to inform the Council of an important decision. Chancellor Vex leaned forward slightly. Yes, Ambassador. What does humanity want now? More representation? More recognition? Perhaps your people have finally learned to ask politely for what they desire. Kim felt the familiar burn of anger in his chest, but his voice remained perfectly calm. Humanity formally withdraws from all current cooperative agreements effective immediately. We will honor existing contracts to completion, but will not be entering into new ones. The chamber fell silent. For a moment, Kim could hear the hum of the environmental systems, the quiet whisper of alien breathing, the distant sound of space traffic outside the station. Then Chancellor Vex began to laugh. It was a harsh, clicking sound that his species made when they found something particularly amusing. Another human tantrum, he announced to the chamber. How long has it been since the last one? 3 years? 4? Do not worry, colleagues. They will be back within a year, begging for inclusion. More laughter rippled through the chamber. The Zenthari science minister shimmered with what Kim recognized as amusement. Perhaps this time, they will learn proper gratitude for the opportunities we provide them. Kim gathered his papers slowly, giving no sign that the mockery affected him. Thank you for the learning experience, he said quietly, then turned and walked out of the chamber. Behind him, the delegates returned to their usual business. They had more important things to discuss than human emotions. Trade agreements to negotiate, territory disputes to mediate. The real work of galactic politics that was far too complex for a young species like humanity to understand. None of them noticed that Kim's final words had been transmitted live to every human settlement in the galaxy. None of them realized that those words were not a diplomatic courtesy, but a formal declaration. The learning experience was over. Class was dismissed. In the weeks that followed, strange reports began filtering in from across the galaxy. Human settlements had gone dark, not destroyed or abandoned, but simply not responding to communications. Trade ships arrived at human ports to find them closed. Diplomatic messages went unanswered. It was as if humanity had collectively decided to ignore the rest of the galaxy. The first real concern came from the medical sector. Dr. Koth of the Zenthari Collective sent an urgent message to the Council. The plague that had been devastating the Torgak homeworld was mutating faster than his team could develop treatments. They needed Dr. Shin's research data to continue their work. But Dr. Shin was gone. Her laboratory was empty. Her research notes incomplete. Her viral samples mysteriously neutralized. The Zenthari medical team was left trying to fight a plague with outdated information and second-hand theories. The Corvani government filed a formal complaint when their new hospital complex ground to a halt. Human construction crews had completed 90% of the work, then simply left. The remaining alien workers could not understand the advanced life support systems or the quantum-stabilized surgical suites. The hospital sat empty, a monument to unfinished promises. On Earth, something unprecedented was happening. Every returning human brought knowledge. Dr. Mira Shin arrived with breakthrough medical research that would take other species decades to duplicate. Admiral Bona Lee came home with tactical innovations that no alien military had ever imagined. Foreman Doyen Park brought construction techniques that could build cities in weeks instead of years. The planet became a fusion of 10,000 different innovations, overseen by the greatest collection of human talent in history. Technologies that had been scattered across the galaxy were combined in ways no single alien species could comprehend. Medical breakthroughs merged with engineering innovations. Military tactics incorporated construction techniques. Scientific research gained new applications through industrial methods. For the first time in human history, all their knowledge was working toward a single goal. Not to serve alien masters or prop up alien economies, but to benefit humanity itself. Dr. Shin met with Admiral Lee and Foreman Park in a secure facility beneath the Pacific Ocean. The room was filled with holographic displays showing research data, construction plans, and tactical analyses. Everything humanity had learned during their centuries of service was being transformed into something entirely new. The medical applications alone will change everything, Dr. Shin was saying, gesturing at displays showing breakthrough treatments that combined alien biotechnology with human innovation. We can cure diseases that have plagued us for millennia. The construction possibilities are even more impressive, Park added, highlighting massive engineering projects that would have been impossible using single-species technology. We can build things that the galaxy has never seen. Admiral Lee studied the tactical displays that showed defensive capabilities beyond anything in current galactic military doctrine. And we can protect ourselves from anyone who might object to our independence. They were no longer working for the galaxy. They were working for humanity alone, and for the first time in their species' history, they had access to all of human knowledge without alien oversight or interference. The galaxy did not yet understand what it had lost, but it was beginning to suspect that something important had changed. Human efficiency had been propping up galactic civilization for decades. Without it, cracks were starting to show in systems that had seemed stable for centuries. The age of human service was ending. What would replace it was still taking shape in laboratories and construction facilities across Earth. But one thing was becoming clear. Humanity had been learning for a very long time. Now it was time to put that education to use. 18 months after humanity's withdrawal, the Corvani plague had spread to 14 star systems. Dr. Koth stood in his laboratory, staring at test results that made no sense. The virus was mutating in ways that defied every model his team had developed. Without Dr. Shin's research, they were fighting a war with outdated weapons. "How many more worlds have reported infections?" he asked his assistant. 3 this week, came the grim reply. The Torgak homeworld is requesting emergency evacuation. They estimate total population loss within 6 months. Dr. Koth closed his eyes. Billions of lives hung in the balance, and he was no closer to a cure than he had been a year ago. The research notes Dr. Shin had left behind were incomplete, filled with references to data that no longer existed. It was like trying to rebuild a house with half the blueprints missing. He had tried contacting Earth directly. The messages were received politely, but the responses were always the same. Humanity appreciated his concern, but they were no longer involved in galactic health initiatives. Perhaps the Council could find other qualified researchers to assist with the crisis. Other qualified researchers. As if replacing Dr. Shin was like changing a broken light fixture. 3,000 light years away, Construction Supervisor Grakoth stood on Platform 7, watching his alien crews struggle with systems they could not understand. The massive defense grid that Foreman Park's teams had built was 70% complete, but the remaining 30% might as well have been on another planet. The power coupling matrix is still not responding, his chief engineer reported. "We've tried every configuration in the manual, but the quantum resonance keeps failing." Grakoth looked at the half-finished command center floating in space. For 6 months, his teams had been trying to complete what the humans had started. They had the blueprints, the materials, even some of the original construction equipment. What they did not have was the knowledge to make it work. "Bring in more Zenthari engineers," he ordered. "Surely their advanced technology can solve this problem." But 3 teams of Zenthari engineers had already failed. The human construction techniques were too different, too integrated, too dependent on knowledge that had never been properly documented. The defense grid sat in space like a massive sculpture, beautiful and completely useless. The real crisis began when the Zephyrian Empire launched their second offensive. Emperor Vraktos had studied the previous battle carefully. He understood that the human tactical innovations had been the key to their defeat, but the humans were gone now, withdrawn to their isolated worlds. This time would be different. The Zephyrian fleet struck the Orvani colonies again, but now they faced only the regular council forces. The Velkari ships used traditional formation, patterns that Zephyrian commanders had been studying for centuries. The Zenthari vessels relied on technologies that looked impressive, but functioned predictably. Within 3 days, The Orvani colonies had fallen. The tactical innovations that had saved them before were nowhere to be found. The alien commanders tried to implement what they remembered of human strategies, but they were like children playing with adult tools they did not understand. Admiral Thokmar, who had taken credit for the previous victory, found himself completely outmatched by the Zephyrian assault. His great fleet was scattered and broken, his tactics exposed as borrowed brilliance he could not recreate. The economic systems were collapsing too. Galactic supply chains that had functioned smoothly for decades suddenly began experiencing critical failures. Trade routes that had always been efficient became bottlenecks. Resource extraction operations that had run perfectly for years started missing quotas. The problem was simple but devastating. Human workers had been the glue that held galactic civilization together. They worked harder, solved problems faster, and adapted to challenges more quickly than any other species. Without them, the carefully balanced systems of trade and production began to fall apart. Chancellor Vex called emergency session after emergency session, but the problems kept multiplying. Worlds that depended on human-maintained infrastructure found their power grids failing. Space stations built with human engineering expertise suffered system breakdowns that local crews could not repair. The newest crisis came from an unexpected source. The Velkari military's pride and joy. Their advanced dreadnought fleet began suffering catastrophic failures. Ships would lose power in the middle of space, their crews helpless as life support systems shut down. Weapons arrays would overload and explode. Shield generators would collapse under their own energy loads. The investigation revealed a disturbing truth. Human engineers had built safeguards into every major system, fail-safes and maintenance protocols that kept the advanced technology functioning properly. With those engineers gone, no one understood how to maintain what they had built. It was like giving a child a quantum computer and expecting them to keep it running without understanding how electricity worked. Ambassador Yuna Choi arrived at the council chambers 6 months after Kim's departure. She was young, quiet, and seemingly inexperienced. The delegates barely noticed her as she took humanity's seat in the great chamber. Unlike her predecessor, Choi never requested speaking time. She never presented proposals or made formal statements. She simply sat in humanity's chair, took careful notes, and observed everything with intelligent eyes. When delegates addressed her directly, she responded with a polite smile and a few courteous words. When asked about humanity's plans, she would say that humanity appreciated their interest. When pressed for specifics, she would thank them for their concern and continue taking notes. Her silence was more unsettling than Kim's passionate speeches had ever been. Chancellor Vex finally confronted her directly after a particularly frustrating session, where 3 more worlds had requested emergency assistance that the Council could not provide. "What does humanity want?" he demanded, his spider-like form looming over her desk. "What will it take to end this childish behavior?" Choi looked up from her notes with calm, intelligent eyes. "Chancellor Vex, humanity appreciates your concern. We are content with our current situation content." Vex's mandibles clicked with frustration. "Your people are hiding on Earth while the galaxy burns. Billions are dying from plagues you could cure. Entire star systems are defenseless because of construction projects you abandoned. This cannot continue. I understand your position," Choi replied politely. "Is there anything else you need from humanity today?" The maddening politeness of her response made Vex want to scream. She was not arguing or making demands. She was not threatening or posturing. She was simply present, watchful, and completely unmoved by his frustration. Rumors began spreading through the galactic communication networks. Ships that tried to approach human space were turned away politely but firmly. Trade vessels found human ports closed to outside traffic. Diplomatic missions were received courteously and sent home with thanks, but no substantive discussions. More disturbing were the reports from long-range sensors. Human settlements were not just surviving in isolation, they were thriving. Energy. Signatures from Earth showed industrial activity beyond anything previously recorded. Construction was proceeding at impossible speeds. Research facilities were operating around the clock. Somehow, humanity had achieved technological breakthroughs that should have taken centuries. Their defensive capabilities were reportedly beyond anything seen in the galaxy. Their industrial output exceeded what they had accomplished while serving alien interests. The truth was becoming undeniable. Humanity had not been learning from the galaxy. The galaxy had been learning from humanity. And now that educational relationship had been permanently severed. Dr. Koth published his final report on the Corvani plague. After 18 months of research, his team had made minimal progress. The virus continued to spread, and entire species faced extinction. His conclusion was simple and devastating. Without human expertise, the medical crisis could not be resolved. Construction supervisor. Gracht filed a similar report about the defense grid project. The incomplete fortifications were beyond his team's ability to finish. The advanced systems required knowledge that no longer existed outside of human space. Admiral Thokmar's report was even more damning. The Zephyrian Empire was gaining strength with each victory, and the Council forces were proving inadequate to stop them. The tactical innovations that had once made their fleet invincible were gone, along with the humans who had created them. The Galactic Council faced the greatest crisis in its 1,000-year history. Member species that had always relied on others for critical services found themselves helpless. Technologies they had taken for granted were failing. Problems they had assumed could always be solved were proving impossible. For the first time, delegates began to whisper the unthinkable. What if humanity did not come back? What if their withdrawal was permanent? What if the galaxy's most reliable problem solvers had decided that some problems were not worth solving? The Zephyrian Empire announced its next target. Earth itself would be conquered, its stubborn population brought into line. The human homeworld would learn that isolation was not protection. The Council received this news with a mixture of fear and anticipation. Perhaps a direct threat would finally force humanity to abandon their isolation and return to. The Galactic Council chambers had never seen chaos like this. Delegates were shouting across the Great Hall, their translation devices struggling to keep up with the panic. Emergency reports flooded in from every corner of the galaxy, each one worse than the last. The Zephyrian Empire had launched their greatest offensive in history. 50 star systems were under attack simultaneously. The Emperor's fleets moved with confidence born from easy victories, crushing resistance wherever they found it. Chancellor Vex stood at the central podium, his spider-like form trembling with rage and fear. "Where are the Velkari defense fleets?" he demanded, grounded. Admiral Thokmar replied, his voice barely audible over the chaos. 60% of our ships are experiencing critical system failures. The rest are afraid to leave port. What about the Zenthari technological superiority? The Zenthari science minister's crystalline form flickered with what everyone recognized as deep embarrassment. "Our weapon systems are malfunctioning. The targeting computers crash every few hours. We believe there were dependencies in the software that we never understood." Chancellor Vex felt something cold settle in his stomach. Dependencies. Software. Systems built by human programmers, maintained by human technicians, updated by human engineers. All gone now, leaving behind advanced technology that worked perfectly until it didn't. The reports kept coming. The incomplete defense grid at Kepler Station had collapsed entirely, taking 3 worlds' orbital defenses with it. Medical stations across 12 systems were shutting down as their advanced life support systems failed without human maintenance. Even basic supply routes were breaking down as automated systems crashed. In the midst of this chaos, Ambassador Yuna Choi sat quietly, in humanity's chair, taking her usual careful notes. Her calm presence in the middle of galactic panic was somehow more unsettling than if she had been celebrating. "Ambassador Choi," Chancellor Vex's voice cut through the noise. "Your people must end this madness. The galaxy is falling apart." Choi looked up from her notes with the same polite expression she always wore. "I am sorry to hear about these difficulties, Chancellor. However, humanity is not responsible for the current crisis." "Not responsible?" Vex's mandibles clicked furiously. "Your people built the systems that are failing. Your engineers designed the defenses that don't work. Your scientists developed the cures we can no longer replicate." That is correct. Choi agreed calmly. Humanity provided those services under our previous cooperative agreements. Those agreements have been terminated. The simple statement hung in the air like a death sentence. The galaxy had spent decades taking human contributions for granted, never bothering to learn how the systems worked or how to maintain them. Now they were discovering what happened when the foundation was removed from beneath a civilization. The Orvani survivors, still living in refugee camps, sent a message that reached every news network in the galaxy. Their spokesperson, an elderly female named Kira, spoke with quiet dignity. We remember who came to save us when no one else would. We remember who died to protect our children. The humans asked for nothing in return except recognition of their sacrifice. Instead, they were ignored and dismissed. We do not blame them for their silence. We blame ourselves for our ingratitude. The message was broadcast on every human settlement, where it was received with somber appreciation, but it also reached the ears of other species, who began to realize that the Orvani were not the only ones who owed their lives to human intervention. Emergency excavation teams reviewing old battle records found disturbing patterns. Conflicts that had been won through superior alien strategy showed clear evidence of human tactical input. Medical breakthroughs credited to various species contained research methodologies that were distinctly human. Construction projects celebrated as examples of alien engineering excellence had been built primarily by human workers. For centuries, the galaxy had been benefiting from human contributions while refusing to acknowledge the source. Now that the source had dried up, the true extent of their dependence was becoming clear. Dr. Koth sent a desperate message directly to Dr. Shin's last known address. The plague was spreading faster than ever, and his latest estimates suggested that 17 species might face extinction within the year. He offered humanity anything they wanted in exchange for assistance: territory, resources, formal recognition, permanent council seats. Anything. The response came back within hours. It was polite but devastating in its simplicity. Dr. Koth, we appreciate your concern for the affected populations. Unfortunately, humanity is no longer involved in galactic medical research. We suggest contacting other qualified species for assistance. Best wishes, Earth Medical Council. Other qualified species. The phrase was becoming a cruel joke. There were no other qualified species, not for the kind of problems humanity had been solving. Construction Supervisor Grakoth received a similar response when he offered the hegemony's entire construction budget to any human teams willing to complete the defense grid. Humanity thanked him for his interest but explained that their construction resources were currently committed to domestic projects. The pattern was clear. Humanity was not angry or demanding. They were not making threats or seeking revenge. They were simply done. Done cooperating with people who would not treat them as equals. Done sacrificing for those who would not acknowledge their sacrifice. Done solving problems for those who would not share the credit. Reports began filtering in from the edges of human space. Long-range sensors detected massive construction projects around Earth and its colonies. Energy signatures suggested industrial activity on a scale never before recorded. Most disturbing of all, defensive installations that seemed to bend the rules of known physics. The Zephyrian Empire, drunk on easy victories, announced their intention to attack Earth directly. Emperor Vraktos appeared in a galaxy-wide broadcast, his reptilian features twisted with arrogance. The human homeworld will be brought into the Empire, he declared. Their stubborn refusal to cooperate will end when they kneel before Zephyrian might. Let this be a lesson to all who would defy us. The announcement sent shockwaves through the council chambers. Earth was not just another colony or outpost. It was the birthplace of humanity, their most heavily defended world. If the Zephyrians could conquer Earth, they could conquer anyone. Chancellor Vex made one final attempt to reach humanity. He sent a formal message to the Global Unity Council, offering everything the galaxy could provide: full membership in the council leadership, equal representation in all decisions, formal recognition of all past human contributions, a permanent voice in galactic policy. The response was swift and final. Chancellor Vex, the Global Unity Council acknowledges your offer. However, humanity's patience with galactic politics has been exhausted. We have learned that self-reliance is preferable to partnership where respect is absent. We wish the Council success in resolving the current crisis through other means. The message was signed by Hanako, President of the Global Unity Council. It was diplomatic, courteous, and absolutely final. As reports of the Zephyrian advance toward Earth reached the Council, a terrible realization began to dawn on the assembled delegates. They were not just watching the invasion of a former ally. They were watching the potential destruction of the only species that could solve their problems. If humanity fell, the plague would continue spreading. The defense systems would remain broken. The supply chains would collapse completely. The galaxy would slide into chaos, and there would be no one left with the knowledge to stop it. For the first time in galactic history, the Council voted unanimously on an emergency resolution. They would send their combined fleets to defend Earth, not out of altruism, but out of pure desperation. Admiral Thokmar, commanding what remained of the functional Council forces, transmitted a message toward Earth as his fleet jumped to hyperspace. Human defenders, this is Admiral Thokmar of the Galactic Council fleet. We are coming to assist in your defense. Please respond with your tactical requirements. The response came back immediately, transmitted on all frequencies with crystal clarity. Admiral Thokmar, Earth Defense Command appreciates your concern. However, we do not require assistance. Please maintain a safe distance from the combat zone for your own protection. Thokmar stared at the message in disbelief. Earth did not require assistance against the largest invasion fleet in galactic history. What could they possibly have that would make them so confident? He was about to find out, and so was the rest of the galaxy. The Zephyrian armada dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Sol system, like a swarm of metal predators. 3,000 ships spread across space in perfect formation, their hulls gleaming with fresh paint and imperial symbols. Emperor Vraktos had brought everything. Dreadnoughts that could crack planets, carriers packed with fighter squadrons, bombardment ships designed to turn cities into glass. Admiral Bonali watched them arrive from the bridge of the Harmony, now flagship of Earth's defense fleet. The human ships were outnumbered 20-1, but Lee felt no concern. She had been preparing for this moment for 3 years. Energy signatures are off the scale, reported her tactical officer. Their flagship alone has more firepower than our entire pre-war fleet. Good, Lee replied calmly. Let them bring everything they have. It will make the lesson more memorable. The Zephyrian Emperor appeared on all communication channels, his reptilian features twisted with cruel satisfaction. Humans of Earth, you will surrender immediately. Your pathetic isolation ends today. Submit to the Empire, and your deaths will be swift. From Earth's orbital command center, President Hanako responded with quiet dignity. Emperor Vraktos, we decline your offer. Please withdraw your fleet while withdrawal remains possible. The Emperor's laughter echoed across space. Withdraw? From a handful of human ships hiding behind their homeworld? You have grown delusional in your isolation? What the Zephyrians could not see were the modifications that had been made to human space. The defense grid surrounding Earth looked similar to what had existed before, but it incorporated technologies that no other species had ever imagined. Fusion reactors that drew power directly from quantum vacuum fluctuations. Shield generators that could redirect energy across dimensional barriers. Weapons that manipulated gravity itself. 3 years of concentrated human innovation, freed from the need to explain themselves to alien supervisors or share their discoveries with ungrateful partners, had produced miracles. Begin the attack, Emperor Vraktos commanded. The Zephyrian fleet surged forward, their weapons charging with the distinctive whine of overloading power systems. They expected to overwhelm Earth's defenses through sheer firepower, to demonstrate, once and for all, that isolation was not protection. Instead, they encountered something impossible. The first wave of Zephyrian missiles simply vanished, not destroyed, not deflected, but gone as if they had never existed. Energy beams that should have carved through human ships bent away at impossible angles, dissipating harmlessly into space. The gravity bombs that had cracked fortress worlds exploded uselessly against barriers that seemed to exist in several dimensions at once. "What is happening?" Emperor Vraktos demanded as his weapons failed to produce any visible effect. His science officers had no explanation. The energy readings from the human defense grid defied everything they understood about physics. It was as if the humans had learned to rewrite the fundamental laws of reality. Admiral Lee gave a simple command. "Return fire." The human response was surgical in its precision. Beams of coherent energy struck Zephyrian ships with impossible accuracy. But instead of destroying them, the weapons disabled their engines and weapon systems. One by one, the massive invasion fleet found itself helpless, drifting in space with their crews unharmed but their ships completely powerless. The entire battle lasted 4 hours. Not a single human ship was destroyed. Not one human life was lost. The greatest invasion fleet in galactic history had been neutralized with almost casual efficiency. Emperor Vraktos found himself aboard a disabled dreadnought, his bridge crew staring at dead screens and silent weapons. A communication request came through their emergency systems. Admiral Lee's face appeared on their main screen. "Emperor Vraktos, your fleet has been disabled as a defensive measure. Your crews are unharmed and will be provided with life support until you can arrange recovery. This is our message to your empire. Humanity does not wish conflict, but we will defend ourselves." The transmission ended, leaving the Emperor staring at a blank screen. Around him, his officers struggled to understand what had just happened. They had brought the most powerful fleet in the galaxy, and it had been swatted aside like insects. Admiral Thokmar and the Council fleet arrived just in time to witness the aftermath. 3,000 Zephyrian ships drifted helplessly, while human vessels moved among them, providing emergency supplies and medical assistance. The humans were not looting the defeated fleet or taking prisoners. They were simply helping, as they always had. "By the void," Thokmar whispered. "What have they become?" The display of power was broadcast across the galaxy through long-range sensors and communication networks. Every species, every government, every individual who had access to galactic communications witnessed the same impossible sight. Humanity had not just defended themselves. They had demonstrated capabilities that made every other military force in the galaxy obsolete. The Galactic Council convened an emergency session within hours. The great chamber was packed as every delegate tried to understand what they had witnessed. Chancellor Vex stood at the central podium, his spider-like form trembling with something that might have been fear. "The situation has changed," he announced unnecessarily. "Humanity has demonstrated capabilities that were previously unknown. We must consider new approaches to our relationship with them." For the first time in Council history, they voted unanimously to formally apologize to a member species. The resolution passed without a single dissenting voice, a testament to their desperation. Ambassador Yuna Choi listened to the speeches about misunderstandings and cultural differences. She waited patiently as delegate after delegate took the podium to explain how the Council's treatment of humanity had been based on innocent mistakes rather than deliberate dismissal. When the chamber finally fell silent, she stood slowly and approached the speaker's podium. For 3 years she had sat quietly and taken notes. Now for the first time she had something to say. "Honored delegates," she began, her voice carrying clearly through the vast chamber. "The Galactic Council has confused humanity's preference for peace with weakness and our desire for cooperation with dependency. This confusion has cost millions of lives and countless opportunities for genuine partnership." She paused, looking around the chamber at faces that had once dismissed her species as primitive laborers. "The apology is acknowledged. However, apologies do not restore the dead or undo centuries of systematic dismissal. Humanity will consider resuming limited cooperation under new terms: equal representation, equal credit, and equal respect. We will no longer accept crumbs from the table while providing the food, Chancellor." Vex leaned forward eagerly. "What are your specific requirements, Ambassador?" Choi smiled, the expression carrying no warmth. Humanity will establish a permanent seat on the Council leadership with full veto power over military operations. All future cooperative agreements will include explicit credit for human contributions. Species that wish to access human medical, technical, or military assistance will formally acknowledge the source of that assistance. The chamber erupted in debate. Several delegates objected to giving humanity such unprecedented power. Others argued that they had no choice given the current crisis. Choi waited for the noise to die down, then continued. These terms are not negotiable. Humanity has learned the value of self-reliance. We no longer need galactic cooperation. You do. The truth of her words hung in the air like a physical presence. The plague continued to spread. The defense systems remained broken. The Zephyrian Empire, while temporarily defeated, would eventually recover. The galaxy needed human expertise more than humanity needed galactic politics. The vote was closer than anyone expected, but it passed. For the first time in galactic history, a single species would hold permanent leadership authority based purely on their indispensable capabilities. Within days, human medical teams returned to the plague-stricken worlds. Dr. Mira Shin led the effort personally, arriving with treatments that had been refined during Earth's isolation. The cures worked with devastating efficiency, stopping the spread within weeks and healing patients that other species had given up for dead. But this time, every medical report clearly stated the source. Treatment developed by Dr. Mira Shin and the Earth Medical Research Council. No alien scientist claimed credit. No Zenthari ministers announced breakthrough discoveries. The humans had made their point clear. Foreman Doyen Park returned to the incomplete defense grid with teams of human engineers. They finished in 3 months what alien crews had failed to complete in 2 years. The resulting fortifications were more advanced than the original plans, incorporating innovations developed during humanity's withdrawal. The Zephyrian prisoners were returned to their empire with a simple message. Earth bore them no ill will, but future aggression would be met with less restraint. Emperor Vraktos, humbled by the casual display of human superiority, signed a non-aggression treaty. Within a month. Admiral Bonali was appointed as the first director of galactic defense, with authority over all military operations. Her first act was to establish training programs where human tactics would be properly taught and credited. No more stolen strategies. No more unacknowledged innovations. Ambassador Choi took her place in the council leadership chambers.